The wind was unusually still that morning, as if even nature held its breath for what was to come. I sat alone on the rickety wooden bench outside my small home, a humble cottage with peeling paint, tucked behind a row of decaying poplars on the edge of town. In my hands I held the invitation card. Not embossed, not addressed, just a plain white envelope with a pre-printed name. You are invited to the wedding of Diana Ray and Oliver Westmont. Or no dad. No father. Not even a scribbled note or a kind word. Just cold, indifferent typography, delivered through the mail like a flyer. I stared at it for a long time. There was no RSVP request, no contact details. Just a location, a date and time. Today, 4:00 p.m. at Rose Hill Estate, one of the city's most luxurious venues. I folded the card back and slipped it into my coat pocket, where it crinkled softly next to my hand. My fingers were still trembling, not from age, but from something else I didn't want to name. Not yet. She was my only daughter, my only child, and I had raised her alone. 27 years earlier, Deanna was just a baby when cancer took her mother. My wife, Anna, had been the gentlest soul I'd ever known, and her absence had hollowed something inside me that never quite filled back up. But for Diana, I became both father and mother, changing diapers in the dark bottle, feeding at dawn, tying ribbons in her hair with clumsy fingers, sewing the torn knees of her jeans with trembling hands. There were nights I'd come home after 3 jobs, collapse on the floor, and still find the strength to help her with math homework. I remember holding her as she cried after her first heartbreak. I remember the laugh she gave me when I danced like a fool at her high school graduation. Every dream she dreamed, I did my best to build a bridge toward it. I never remarried. I never even thought about it. Diana was enough. As she grew older, she started to shine brighter than I ever imagined. She was smart. Top of her class, captain of the debate team, scholarship offers from Ivy League schools. But what made me proudest was her heart. She used to hug me tightly and whisper, "One day I'll take care of you, Papa. You'll never have to work again." I believed her. I wanted to. But life has a funny way of changing people. Or maybe wealth does. 3 years ago, Diana landed a job at one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. She moved into a glass-walled apartment with a rooftop view, drove a car that looked like something out of a sci-fi film, and started dating Oliver Westmont, the heir to an old money family known more for power than principles. She brought him home once. Just once. He shook my hand like it was dirty, glanced at my worn-out shoes, smirked when he saw the small oil stain on my kitchen counter. He said nothing rude, not directly, but the silence was heavy with judgment. After that visit, Diana came less often. Then hardly at all. I tried to call. She was always busy. I texted, she answered with one-word replies. Holidays passed with no visits. My birthday came and went with nothing but a forwarded email from a digital flower service. "Happy birthday!" in a generic font, no signature. And now, her wedding. My own daughter's wedding. No phone call. No request to walk her down the aisle. Just an unsigned invitation in the mail. Back to present, I stood before the mirror, adjusting the collar of my only suit. One I'd worn to her high school graduation and her college award ceremony. It was a bit tighter around the middle now, and the thread on the sleeves had started to fray, but it was clean and pressed. I combed my silver-streaked hair, smoothed out the creases in my pants, and checked the time. 20:30 p.m. I would need to leave soon to catch the bus. Yes, the bus. I hadn't driven in years. After I retired from my janitor job at the elementary school, I'd sold the car to cover some medical bills. My knees ached more these days, and I walked slower than I used to, but I could still manage. As I walked to the bus stop, I wondered what kind of music she'd chosen for the ceremony, what flowers would line the aisle, whether she'd wear white or champagne, whether anyone would recognize me, or care. A small part of me, that stupid, stubborn, hopeful part, imagined her running toward me, hugging me tight, saying, "I'm sorry, Papa. I didn't mean to forget. I was just lost in everything. But you're here now." But I knew better. Life had taught me that fairy tales only exist for those who can afford them. The bus ride was long and quiet. Nobody spoke. I kept my eyes on the changing scenery as the city melted into gold, tinted suburbs, and finally into the rolling green hills, where Rosie Hill Estate stood like a castle among the trees. The gates were tall and black, with gold trim curling like ivy. I told the guard my name. He looked down at his list, frowned, then stepped aside wordlessly. "No welcome, sir." Just a nod. I stepped through the archway and into another world, one of marble fountains, imported flowers, and people who drank champagne like water. I saw her, my Diana, standing at the far end of the garden in a dress that shimmered like starlight, her back to me, laughing at something the groom whispered. My heart stilled. She looked beautiful, regal, a stranger. Then the groom turned his head, and his eyes locked with mine, cold gray eyes. He leaned slightly toward her, smirking, and said something that cracked the last unbroken piece of me. "That old man has come again." "Not your father. Not even he. Just that old man." I stood there, unseen and unwanted. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. She didn't move at all. And in that moment, I realized the truth. I had raised her body, fed her dreams, and carried her spirit. But somewhere along the way, someone else had taken her soul. I looked down at my hands. Hands that had once held hers through thunderstorms and scraped knees, and slowly turned around. I didn't belong here. Not anymore. But destiny had a funny sense of timing. Because as I walked away from the laughter and light, toward the gray solitude of the road, I had no idea that someone from the past had seen everything, and he hadn't forgotten. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I stepped away from the sprawling estate. The sounds of clinking glasses and cheerful laughter faded behind me, replaced by the steady rhythm of my own footsteps and the echo of that cruel sentence. That old man has come again. Again. As if I were a stray dog returning to a place that never truly welcomed me. As if my love, my presence, my very existence was a burden, an embarrassing inconvenience on their perfect day. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I was far beyond tears. Some wounds didn't bleed, they sank quietly, becoming part of the bones. Earlier that day, from another perspective near the garden's edge, standing in the crowd like a shadow, was a man in a charcoal, gray suit, sunglasses hiding his eyes, arms folded. He had arrived early, not out of eagerness, but curiosity. His name was Arav Mehta, CEO of Mehta Group Holdings, one of the country's rising economic giants. A man feared in boardrooms, respected in silence, and envied in every financial circle. But once, long ago, he was just a hungry, hopeless young man, crouched under the rain outside a broken laundromat, clutching a rejection letter from another job that didn't want him, and the man who gave him his first warm meal and his first words of belief. Me. He saw me as I entered the venue, uncertain but proud, holding my spine straight despite the weight of my old shoes and older heart. He watched me walk past the guests, ignored, invisible. He was standing barely 5 feet away when he heard Oliver, the groom, say it with a chuckle. That old man has come again. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched in fists. He saw me hesitate, saw me turn, saw the pain I tried to swallow whole, but he didn't speak. Not yet. He simply took out his phone and began to type. Back to my side of the story, I walked for half a mile before I realized I'd gone the wrong direction. My legs had moved of their own accord, away from the buses, away from everything. I sat down under an oak tree by the roadside and exhaled deeply. A few cars passed, but no one looked my way. I didn't expect them to. I must have been sitting there for almost an hour when a sleek black car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. "Mr. Ray?" a warm voice asked. I turned slowly. A young man in a suit stepped out. "Mr. Arav Mehta sent me. He'd like to see you." "Arav Mehta," I repeated, the name sounding distant and unfamiliar for a moment. "He said you're the reason he's alive." My chest tightened. Arav, the boy with the torn shirt, shivering outside the schoolyard. I hadn't thought of him in years. I nodded, too tired to ask more, and followed the man into the car. The seats were plush, and everything smelled of leather and money. For a moment, I felt like I didn't belong again. But this time, I wasn't being looked down on. I was being valued. The penthouse, the elevator opened with a soft chime to a space so wide and open that it felt like stepping into the sky itself. Floor to ceiling windows looked out over the city. A giant chandelier hung above a table made of imported wood, and rare art lined the walls. And in the center of the room stood Arav, taller than I remembered, with streaks of silver in his hair, but the same intensity in his eyes. I froze in the doorway. He walked toward me slowly, then without a word, bowed and hugged me. Tightly. "Uncle," he said softly. "You came." I was speechless. My hands hung by my sides, unsure what to do. No one had hugged me like that in years. "You remember me?" I finally asked. He pulled away just enough to look at me. "Remember you? You saved my life. A life remembered." He sat me down and we talked. He told me how, after his father's death, his family lost everything. How no one would hire him because of his poor grades and background. How I had found him outside the school gate, hungry and humiliated, and took him home. I had fed him, given him clean clothes, taught him how to write a proper resume. "You told me, you are not what the world thinks of you. You are what you decide to become." I had forgotten the words. He had built an empire with them. "I never found you again," he said. "I searched everywhere. All I had was your name in the neighborhood." I smiled faintly. "I stayed where I always was, just got smaller over time." He shook his head, furious. "You deserve better." "I had Diana," I said, my voice cracking. That was enough. But even as I said it, something shattered inside me again. Arav saw it. He leaned forward. I saw what happened at the wedding. I heard him. I waved it off, not wanting pity. "It's nothing." "No," he said. "It's everything." "The plan begins." Arav stood and poured 2 glasses of water. He handed me one, his eyes glowing with something sharp beneath the calm. "You never asked me for anything, Uncle, but now I'm going to ask you for something." I raised my brows. "Let me fix this?" he said. "Not for revenge. For justice." I hesitated. "I don't want Diana hurt," he smiled. "She won't be hurt, but she will understand. So will that boy she married." "What do you plan to do?" I asked carefully. He leaned back, steepling his fingers like a man accustomed to power. "Let's just say, the Westmont family is overdue for a lesson in humility." Back at the wedding reception, the celebration roared into the evening. Guests danced under golden lights, and Oliver laughed loudly, already tipsy on vintage wine. Diana looked happy, but there was an emptiness behind her smile. A hollowness only I, her father, would have recognized if I were there still. But something was already shifting. Half the catering team suddenly left, claiming urgent matters. One of the bands scheduled to perform didn't show up. The groom's cousin received a notification that his company shares had been frozen. Oliver's father received a discreet message that one of their major investors, a silent partner, had pulled out of a key deal. No one knew that all of it was connected to Arav Mehta. And this was only the beginning. I slept peacefully that night. I lay on a simple cot at Arav's estate guest house, staring at the ceiling. No gold chandeliers, no marble floors, just silence. But this time, it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. And somewhere deep in my chest, I felt something stir. Not bitterness, not vengeance. Closure. Because I hadn't lost my worth. It had just been hidden beneath years of dust, silence, and sacrifice. Now, the world would see. The morning after the wedding was quiet. Too quiet. The Westmont mansion, normally filled with servants, advisors, and shallow laughter, seemed oddly subdued. The news had not reached the papers yet. But in the world that really mattered to people like Oliver and his family, rumors traveled faster than truth, and the rumors were loud. Something was wrong. Meanwhile, in the guest house, I woke up early, as I always did. Decades of labor didn't let a man sleep past dawn, no matter how soft the mattress. I sat on the small balcony of the guest house with a warm cup of chai that Arav's staff had made specially for me. As I watched the sun rise, For the first time in years, I felt no weight on my shoulders, no bills to worry about, no loneliness screaming in the silence. Just the morning breeze and the slow rhythm of peace. Arav joined me a few minutes later, dressed casually in jeans and a black sweater. He looked younger without his suit. More like the boy I once knew, the one who used to walk home with my daughter after school, carrying her heavy bag without being asked. "Uncle," he said, handing me a folder. "I want to show you something." I opened it slowly. Inside were documents, photographs, and signed affidavits. Evidence of years of corruption, manipulation, and fraud by Oliver's family. Shady land deals, underpaid workers, offshore tax evasion. Some of it was shocking. Some of it was predictable. "You've been gathering this?" I asked. "For a while," he nodded. "I once tried to warn Diana, but I think she was too far gone by then." I paused. "She wasn't always like this." He looked at me. "I know." A flashback. A simpler time. Diana was 17. It was raining that afternoon. Her school had let out early. She called me, panicked. Her shoes were soaked, her books drenched, and she didn't want to take the bus alone. I had just finished a 12-hour janitorial shift. My body screamed for rest. But I didn't even hesitate. I borrowed a colleague's bicycle, pedaled through the storm, and found her under the awning near the school gate, hugging her bag, trying to stay dry. She looked up, saw me, and her face lit up. "You came?" "Always," I said, soaking wet but smiling. We rode home, her arms around my waist, laughing as the rain splashed us from all sides. That night, she made me tea, sat beside me, held my hand. "Papa," she said, "one day I'll make all of this up to you. I promise." Back to present, I closed the folder and sighed. She used to have the kindest heart. Arav nodded, but didn't say anything. Then, he handed me a second envelope. This one was sealed. "What's this?" I asked. "Your name is on it." I broke the seal. Inside was a deed to a house. A beautiful cottage near the mountains, paid in full. "I can't accept this," I whispered. "You already did. A long time ago," Arav said. "When you gave a hungry boy hope. This is just interest." I couldn't speak. And in that silence, he told me something even more surprising. "The decision? I have a plan, Uncle," Arav said, rising. "One that doesn't hurt Diana, but it will shake her enough to see the truth." He told me how the Westmont's empire relied heavily on appearances. Trust, prestige, and exclusive relationships with luxury partners and government allies, all of which he now had influence over. "I'm going to pull every quiet string I can," he said. "Let their world tremble just enough." "And Diana?" I asked. "She'll have to come to terms with the truth. And when she does, you'll be ready to speak. Not as a beggar, but as her father." The cracks begin to show. 3 days after the wedding, Oliver received an email from a major investor. "Due to a change in our strategic alliances, we are forced to withdraw from the upcoming development project. We wish you well." The second email came an hour later, a regulatory notice. The third was a press leak, a blog post, quiet but viral, suggesting Westmont Industries had connections to outdated offshore shell companies. Within hours, it was being shared across investor forums and financial watchdog groups. Diana was the first to panic. "Why is everything falling apart?" she cried to Oliver, who was too busy making angry phone calls to answer. They started arguing, loudly, daily, and when her calls to the firm went unanswered. When her company email was suddenly restricted, she started to think of me. Diana's visit, I was watering the small balcony plants at Arav's guest house when the intercom buzzed. The guard said, "Sir, a Ms. Diana Westmont is here. Says she wants to see her father." My hands froze. Arav, sitting across the room, looked up from his laptop and nodded once. "Let her in." Minutes later, she walked in, elegant, nervous, distant. "Papa," she began, voice trembling. I know I haven't been the best daughter lately. I know I've been distant. But things are happening. To Oliver, to his family. And I think I need help." I said nothing. Just looked at her. For the first time in years, she couldn't meet my eyes. Confrontation without anger, she sat across from me, wringing her hands. I know you were at the wedding. I saw you, she admitted. It wasn't the right moment. You mean the moment where your husband called me that old man? I said calmly. She flinched. I didn't tell him to say that. But you didn't stop him either. Her eyes welled up. I was embarrassed, she whispered. Of me? I asked. Of the man who raised you, carried you when you were sick, starved so you could eat better food. She started sobbing. I got lost. Papa, she cried. I thought I was doing what you wanted. Living better, becoming successful. I thought I was making you proud. I leaned forward. I was already proud. When you smiled, when you hugged me for no reason, when you called me Papa like it meant something. A glimpse of redemption. She cried in my arms for the first time since she was a teenager. I didn't say, I told you so. I didn't mention the betrayal, the absence, the cold invitations. I simply held her, because that's what fathers do. But this time I wasn't just her father. I was the man she had underestimated and finally recognized. The storm ahead later that evening. As Deanna left with puffy eyes and trembling hands, Arav stood beside me on the balcony. Do you think she'll change? He asked. She already has, I said, but it'll take time. He nodded. The Westmonths? I asked. He smiled thinly. They'll learn. Slowly. Publicly. I didn't need revenge anymore. But justice. Justice had finally begun to whisper through the halls that once silenced my name. We often assume that betrayal strikes with swords, loud, obvious, and sudden. But it doesn't, it whispers. And when the veil finally falls, what's left is not just pain, but clarity. The collapse begins, the headlines didn't scream, not yet. But they didn't have to. Regulatory Board opens inquiry into Westmont Holdings. Anonymous whistleblower reveals tax irregularities in prominent family-owned conglomerate. Major investors quietly pull back from multi-million-dollar Westmont projects. Oliver and his father scrambled behind velvet curtains, frantically placing calls to old allies, politicians, financiers, media contacts. But the doors were no longer opening with ease. They had been quietly, methodically closed, by Arav Mehta, and by the truth itself. The House of Glass Diana sat at the edge of her pristine white bed, staring at her phone screen as the calls went unanswered. Oliver was shouting in the other room, something about asset freezes, breached contracts. A journalist asking questions he didn't know how to answer. She felt the walls around her begin to tremble. This world, all gold and marble and cocktail diplomacy, had never felt so fragile. Maybe it's all a misunderstanding, she had told herself at first. It'll blow over. But the voice inside her, the voice she hadn't listened to in years, was whispering again. What have I become? The memory, that wouldn't leave. She couldn't stop seeing her father's face. The way he had stood quietly in that suit with the threadbare cuffs, at the edge of the wedding lawn, trying not to look lost, not to look broken. She had ignored him, let him walk away. And when Oliver had sneered, that old man has come again, she hadn't flinched, hadn't defended, hadn't even looked back. But now, that moment haunted her. Every time she blinked, that old man had raised her when she was sick, cold, heartbroken. That old man had once pawned his wedding ring to buy her a laptop for university. That old man was the only reason she had ever known what love felt like, and she had let him walk away from her wedding alone. A private revelation, Oliver's anger turned inward. He started blaming Deanna for bad luck, for distracting him, for not managing her image properly. But then, something happened that tore the final veil from her eyes. She overheard a phone call. It was Oliver speaking to his father. I don't care what happens to the company. I married her for optics. Her background made us look grounded. If she becomes a liability, I'll cut her loose. Let her run back to her poor papa. The words sliced through her. She stood behind the door, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping the wood until her knuckles turned white. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. she walked away. Back to the one man who had never used her, never lied to her, never turned away, even when she had. At my doorstep, it was late evening when I heard the knock on the guest house door. I opened it and saw her standing there. No makeup, no jewelry, just jeans and a sweater. Her eyes were tired. Red. "Papa," she whispered. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. She sat on the same chair her mother used to sit in, looked around the quiet, modest room, and then she broke. Tears fell in heavy silence. Shoulders shook. Her breath came in gasps. She didn't even try to speak, just buried her face in her hands. I sat beside her, put a hand on her back, waited. When she finally looked up, she said just one sentence. "I want to come home." The conversation that needed to happen, we talked for hours. About the years she had been away, the choices she made, the pride that blinded her, the loneliness behind the photos she used to send me, all filters and fake smiles. "I kept trying to prove something," she said, "but I forgot who I was trying to prove it to." She looked at me then, and I forgot who I am. I didn't respond with scolding or bitterness. I simply said, "You were never meant to chase their world, Diana. You were meant to build your own." Meanwhile, the empire crumbles. In the world Diana left behind, chaos ruled. One by one, the Westmont investments were exposed for what they were, empty shells propped up by arrogance and borrowed influence. A slow collapse, public and humiliating. The media caught on. A formal investigation launched. Oliver tried to spin it as a political attack. But the facts were too many, too solid, too damning. And Arav, the silent hand behind the curtain, watched with calm intensity. He had never wanted to destroy them. He just wanted them to fall on their own rotten foundation. Diana's stand a week after her visit. Diana returned to the city. Not to her mansion, she resigned her lease. Not to Oliver, she left her wedding ring and a signed annulment letter on his desk. She went straight to the press. In a quiet, elegant press conference, she spoke plainly. "I distanced myself from the man who made me who I am. I let money blind me, but I won't continue the lie. My name is Diana Ray, daughter of George Ray, a janitor, a widower, a father, and the kindest man I've ever known. I'm not ashamed of where I come from. I'm proud." The reporters were stunned. The world listened. Not just because of her name, but because truth has a tone that cannot be faked. The call later that night, Arav called me. "She did it," he said. "She stood tall. She's always had that in her," I replied. "She just forgot." "She remembered because of you," he said softly. I didn't answer. But I looked up at the sky, and somewhere deep in my chest, I felt Anna beside me. Back to the garden a month later, Diana came to visit again, this time with a small box in her hand. Inside it was a new watch, simple, leather-strapped, classic. On the back it was engraved, "To the man who gave me time, love, and everything. Your daughter." I took it slowly. My hands trembled again, but this time from love. She looked at me and smiled through her tears. "I'll never let you walk into a room unseen again, Papa," and I believed her. Revenge is often imagined as loud, as fire, fury, retribution. But the sweetest kind doesn't roar. It simply lives well, and lets truth walk in on its own feet. 6 months later, the seasons had turned. The trees behind my little house were shedding their golden leaves, and the wind carried with it the scent of cinnamon and cold. I had returned to my old home. Not because I couldn't stay with Arav, but because I wanted to be in the place that made me who I was. The community had changed. A few old neighbors had moved. A few more had passed. The town knew what had happened, of course. The story had spread far and wide. Diana Ray, the woman who walked away from a crumbling empire to stand beside her father. Westman Empire investigated. Collapses after scandal. Assets frozen. Lawsuits filed. But in this little home, none of that mattered. What mattered was the knock on the door every Sunday. Always at 8 a.m., always her. A daughter returns. Diana now visited regularly. Not because she felt guilty. Not because she needed help. But because she finally remembered who she was. She brought flowers for her mother's photo. cooked breakfast sometimes, though she was still terrible at flipping parathas. She helped me paint the fence one weekend. We laughed when we spilled more paint on ourselves than the wood. She took me for walks, asked me about memories, listened when I spoke, really listened. She was no longer the glass doll I had raised and lost. She was stronger now, because she had been broken and rebuilt, on her own terms, with her roots planted deep. Oliver. The Westmonts. They faded. Oliver tried to claw back some power, but the lawsuits drained him. His name, once praised, became a warning label. Investors fled. Friends disappeared. His father retired quietly, humiliated. And Diana? She didn't speak of him often. Only once. She said, "I thought I married a man who would protect me. But I had already been protected my whole life by you." A surprise visit one foggy November morning, Arav dropped by. He brought tea, real Assam leaves, my favorite. We sat on the porch while Diana worked in the little garden I had long neglected. "She's different now," he said. I nodded. "She found herself." "No," he replied. "She found you again, and through you, herself." I looked at Arav. "You made all of this possible. You didn't have to." He smiled. "You once told me when I was 16 and hopeless that we never truly lose when we live with integrity. That the world eventually turns toward the light, even if it forgets where it came from." He paused. "I wanted to remind you that the world didn't forget you. It just took a little time to catch up." Her speech, Diana was invited to give a talk at a women's leadership summit that winter. She asked me to come. I wore a new suit. Arav had it made for me. It fit better than my old one. But I still wore my father's watch, the one Diana had given me, engraved and full of meaning. I sat in the front row as she walked onto the stage. She stood tall, her voice clear, her heart wide open. "I was raised by a man who never had much in his pocket, but gave me the world with his hands. I lost myself trying to prove something to people who didn't matter, and in the process, I nearly lost the one person who always did. My father is not a CEO, not a billionaire, not a man with social power, but he is the most successful man I know, because he built a life of love, resilience, and unwavering values. And now I'm building mine beside him." She ended the speech to a standing ovation, but she didn't look at the cameras. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and mouthed, "I love you, Papa." The birthday that changed everything. A few months later, on my 63rd birthday, I expected nothing. I never liked to fuss. I was sitting alone with a book when Diana walked in. She had something behind her back. "Happy birthday," she said. I smiled. "Is that another watch?" "My wrists are getting heavy, you know?" She shook her head, laughing. Then she handed me a folder. Inside was a letter and a certificate of partnership. She had started a foundation in my name, the George Ray Foundation, for fathers who raise the world. It offered scholarships to single fathers raising children, financial support for widowers in low-income neighborhoods, and mentorship programs to help reconnect families. I stared at the papers, then at her. "I don't understand," I whispered. She knelt beside my chair, resting her head against my chest like she used to as a child. "You spent your whole life lifting me up," she said. "Now, I want your name to lift others." The final scene, it was spring again. I was in my little garden, wearing gloves too big for my hands and squinting at the weeds. Diana came out with 2 mugs of coffee. "Taking a break?" she asked. "Old bones," I replied. "They're stubborn." She sat next to me. We watched the wind move through the trees. "Do you think she would have been proud?" she asked quietly. "Your mother?" I smiled, looking up at the sky. "She'd be furious." "Why?" Diana laughed. "Because you took her teacups without asking?" We both laughed then, loud, free, real. No weight, no bitterness, no regret, just love, just life, just the quiet joy of being seen again. Epilogue: the sweetest revenge is not destruction, it's resurrection. And the softest heart doesn't break. It bends, and then it brings everything back to life.